morning. Welcome to our 44th annual breakfast. We're going to start we have invocation performed by Reverend Susan Phillips from Blessed Sacrament, and as soon as we are finished with that, we're going to start with breakfast. All right. Reverend?
I think I got promoted. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the honor of being here today. It is a huge honor to be in the presence of many people in this fabulous community, and I'm new here. I was called to First Presbyterian Church 18 months ago, and so thank you for all the ways that you show up to make a difference in this community. Thank you to Frontiers International, to Larry Hemingway, Richard Amoko for the invitation. I'm grateful to be here. I begin this invocation with an awareness that the land on which we meet ancestrally belongs to people that may not be in this room. The Miami, the Illiniwek, the Meskwaki, the Potawatomi. I remember their history as we gather in this space for prayer. And I do so aware that not all of us are religious. Some of us are, some of us aren't, and those of us who are come from different traditions. So in whatever these next few moments may bless you, do that. We gathered this day in memory of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. We gather from many directions, spaces, traditions, and perspectives. We bring a variety of experiences, griefs, hopes, and prayers. We offer our dreams, work, poetry, and songs. We gather as your people, beautiful and gifted in all our differences, and celebrate your presence among us. We need not invoke you. You are already here. But please invoke in us awareness of our history, not just the freedoms that we celebrate, but the history of genocide, enslavement, misogyny, and increasing economic disparity. Invoke from us deeper commitments to dismantle systemic racism and other discrimination of ability, sexuality, gender. Invoke from us vision of your love and justice for all beings, for all the well-being of creation. And in the memory of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, challenge us to live a new day. Amen.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let me welcome everyone to the 44th annual Martin Luther King Breakfast, sponsored by Frontiers International, and I'm glad to see everyone here. Let me first apologize for the rush and urgency. Our wonderful speaker has a plane to catch this afternoon at 1 o'clock. And I promised our speaker we will make sure she gets on that plane so she can get back and teach that class in the morning tomorrow. May God be with us. So continue to eat and be mindful that we have many dignitaries and guests up here that have some good information that they want to bring to you. Let me also say that Frontiers International and the citizens of Springfield, thank you for your support, your help, and your guidance in helping us mentor and teach and guide our young men. We have our junior Frontiers in the back with the gold vests on. Will the junior Frontiers please stand? Would you give them a hand? Once again, I'm Austin Randolph, and I'm president of the Frontiers International Springfield Club. And we truly believe that we need each and every one of you to help us mentor our young men. We want them to be productive citizens. We want them to be leaders in the community, and we want to make sure we keep them out of trouble. And your help and your guidance will make that possible. And the programs that we provide in terms of leadership and civic will make sure that they go down that path. And I won't stay here long because I have too many people that have so many things to say to each and every one of you. But I definitely want to thank you for your support, your financial support, your love, your prayers, your dreams. And if you see any young people in the city, please reach out and help all of them. We cannot reach them all, but with the help and all of you in the village, we're all one big happy family. We need you, and we thank you, and we look forward to continuing to receive your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother President. I just wanted to do one quick change in that. Our president said that our speaker has to be on a plane at 1 o'clock, and I just wanted to make sure that you understood that that wasn't Capitol Airport. All right. Our first welcomee after our president needs no introduction. He is almost Mr. Frontier because anybody here remember the days when we had the breakfast? This is our 44th one now, so you may not want to raise your hand. But when before Martin Luther King's birthday was a holiday, remember that? Because I remember people have to take time off on that Monday morning to come to the breakfast. But thanks to Senator Durbin, he's done that and many more things for and with the Frontiers, and we appreciate him. Senator, come give us a welcome, please. Keep your town down, you know what the president said.
He was giving me credit for something. I'm not sure what it is, but I will accept it. Loretta and I are happy to be back with you this morning for this annual event, which brings together the city of Springfield in a way that you just don't see. It is nothing short of amazing, the people who are here from all walks of life, and it is an honor to be here and to hear from Tracy Mears. Tracy and I first met when she was a high school student, maybe? Yeah. And got to know her family, and she is an extraordinary story. She is on the faculty of law schools I could never get admitted to. And so I stand in awe of what she has achieved. The important thing that Dr. Martin Luther King taught us is to listen, to hear one another, to try to understand what each of us face in this world. Listening sometimes is a challenge. I was down in Nashville at the Country Opry, and a fellow stood up who was a country and western singer named Bobby Bear, who's been around a while. And he said, "You probably noticed that I'm wearing a hearing aid. I'll tell you how I happened to get that hearing aid. It was my anniversary. And my wife said to me, 'You know, I'm proud of you.' And I said to her, 'You know, I'm getting tired of you too.'" He said, "I've been wearing a hearing aid ever since." Disabuse yourself of the notion that as we come here today to celebrate the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., that when he was alive, his life was being celebrated. He was a controversial man. If you think there's evidence in America of hate speech and the like, I can still remember as a young man in college what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. faced as he tried to march through the city of Chicago and as he stood up and spoke out for those less fortunate. I've always thought to myself, as we honor him, we should take a moment and say, where would he be today? What would he be talking about today? What would he focus on today that is still controversial but really addresses what he told us and what he taught us? I think there are many areas. We recently passed a bill on criminal justice reform for sentencing, for criminal sentencing, to finally put an end to the horrible criminal sentencing, which has increased the American prison population by 700% since 1980. We have more people in prison than any other nation on earth. That is an injustice that needs to be corrected, and we passed a bill to start to move in that direction. Is there any doubt where Dr. Martin Luther King would be today when it comes to the issue of treating immigrants to this country, of making certain that children are not separated from their parents, as happened just not that long ago on our border? We know he'd be speaking out, and he wouldn't always be popular, but that's why we come today to honor him. This man of principle, this man of courage, his life was shortened, and we try to keep his memory alive. I'm glad that the home of Abraham Lincoln does this each year, and honored to be with you. Thank you.
Next to welcome the Honorable Mayor of the City of Springfield, Mr. Langfelder.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Professor Tracy Mears, her deservedly proud parents, Carolyn and Bob Blackwell, President Austin Randolph, honorable members of the dais, Frontier Yoke Fellows, and everyone in attendance. On behalf of the City of Springfield, the City Council, and our residents, it gives me great honor to welcome you to this 44th Annual Frontiers International Breakfast honoring the Dr. Martin Luther King. Thank you for giving us your most precious time, your gift of your time. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter." That is why public engagement with government today is essential in building a stronger tomorrow. This has been proven fruitful when we held our police chief public forums back in 2015, before my selection of Police Chief Kenny Winslow. Chief Winslow truly understands the importance of public engagement, embracing President Barack Obama's 21st century policing, including the essence of community policing as it relates to Springfield, along with a diversified police force. Our 40 public ward plan meetings have given the public the opportunity to tell city directors and city council members what is important to them within their ward, their neighborhood, and throughout our city. This has given the City Council a greater understanding of what's important and the challenges we have in each ward and as a city as a whole. At this time, I'd like our City Council members and elected officials to stand and be recognized, and also you see who you can share your insights with. So if you please take a moment and stand. All the aldermen, alderwomen. Thank you for your service. I encourage each and every one to continue to speak up, share concerns, communicate your solutions, and most importantly, persevere. If we want our city, our state, and our country to continue to be great, we all need to work together and be part of the solution. Thankfully, our community has leaders that have not forgotten their humble beginnings, like our Honorable Senator Dick Durbin, who gives us his strong voice in Washington, and I wish you the best of luck to end the shutdown and do what's in the best interests of our country. We can't thank you enough. Another person who has not forgotten their humble beginnings, and we're honored to have her present today, is Professor Tracy Mears, who served on the 21st Century Policing Task Force, and whose grandmother, Velma Carey, provided the research that brought the Springfield's race riot markers to light. This past year, the city's 1908 race riot markers were rededicated to be more prominent, so Springfield, the state of Illinois, the United States of America, and the world will be better understanding that our city's tragic history led to a greater light, like the formation of the NAACP, who is led by Teresa Haley, who's with us today, and we can't thank her enough for continuing the cause of advancing the importance of all people. It is also an important opportunity to celebrate the challenges that we face as one diverse community, always remembering that Springfield is a place where future presidents and world leaders like our great emancipator, Abraham Lincoln, and our first African-American President, Barack Obama, both learned their legislative roots and went on to lead by bringing our country together. No other city in the United States has had as much influence over race relations as Springfield, Illinois. We should embrace our past so others around our state, our country, and our world will learn from it. Let us continue these efforts by facing Springfield's challenges together. We need to continually reflect, reassess, and work together so we make Dr. Martin Luther King's dream a reality for Springfield and beyond. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mayor. Now we'll have from the county, Mr. Van Meter, Chair of the Board.
I'm supposed to welcome you, but I think you've been thoroughly welcomed. So instead, I'd like to give you a sales pitch. It's for a program called Grow Your Own, a program that started out of the 10th Street Railroad project, funded by a far-sighted business in our community, Hanson Engineers and the City of Springfield and Sangamon County. And the concept of this program is to make sure that there's a high degree of minority participation in the project. What we're trying to do is recruit young people in the high school, at the high school level, for degrees in STEM, engineering, and the sciences. And I'd like to recognize if the Frontiers organization has been a fantastic participant for us in this organization. And our proudest graduate of the program is probably Michael Phelan. If Michael's here, he's now the superintendent of the 10th Street project, working for Henson Engineers. And if the Frontiers kids who are participating in the project, if they'd stand up, I'd just like to recognize all of them. Thank you.
Just a couple of announcements that I wanted to make. One is that the NAACP is having their annual march that they do on Martin Luther King Day. The MLK Unity March by the NAACP is going to be starting at 12 o'clock at Pilgrim Rest Church. I also would like to have you maintain a healthy respect for those people who are sponsors of the Frontiers. They help us with all of the kinds of things that we do, particularly when we're working with our young people, which we have been doing for, Derek, what do you think, over 30 years, and helping young people learn and go to school and graduate and go to college and so on. And our sponsors, once again, our community leaders have been very generous. At this time, I'd just like to thank all of our event sponsors and recognize 4 groups in particular who joined at the highest level of we call platinum sponsors. With the guests from HSHS St. John's Hospital, Illinois Times, Springfield Business Journal, Memorial Health Systems, Westminster Presbyterian Church, please stand up and be recognized for your generous, generous support. Thank you very much. Brother Hemingway? Yes, sir. It's your turn.
Good stuff. I get to do some of the fun stuff. And as I unwrap this plaque, I would like to take time out really to recognize any former junior frontiersmen, any former junior frontiers in the room, we want to pay homage and give you a little salute as well. Please stand at this time, any former junior frontiersmen. Thank you. Thank you. It's a beautiful thing to see them continue to come back, facilitate workshops with the other boys, as well as continue to come be a part of the breakfast. I believe Dr. King said, he asked the question, one of the most persistent and urgent questions that can be asked is, what are you doing for others? And with that, this family that we're going to recognize has been doing for others over the past, I want to say 3 decades, with a track record of providing service and resources to well over, I want to say 40 organizations. And if you can imagine that, 40 organizations which obviously provide ongoing services and resources within the central Illinois area. And so their motto is, it's not about cars, it's about people. And so Frontiers would like to present our Community Service Award presented to Green Family in appreciation for many years of support to Frontiers International Springfield Club and our youth programs. As a result of your efforts and contributions, Frontiers International Springfield Club continues to be a success at enhancing and promoting young people to be positive contributors to society, presented on this day. So, Milas Copeland, if you would come at this time and accept this on behalf of Frontiers.
To President Randolph and Brother Hemingway and to all of you, for 35 years now, the Green Family Stores have tried to give something back to our community. When I started in 1997, the one thing that Todd Green said is get involved. Springfield is a community that when involved, they will support you. We try to do as much as we can with what we have, and we are only able to do that because of your support. So thank you so much for what you've done. Thank you for allowing us to give back to the community that we love so much. Thank you.
Jeremiah, your turn. The president of the Junior Frontiers, Jeremiah Thomas.
Good morning. Good morning. What a privilege it is to speak with you all today. Every time I attend this breakfast, I am in awe of the support and encouragement that we get from the community. And so, to start off, I would like to say thank you. Without your continued support, we wouldn't be able to honor the works and legacy of Dr. King like we do now, and hopefully for many years to come. I would also like to thank the Springfield Frontiers, who persistently work to make this event come together smoothly year after year. My personal thanks goes out to Reverend Patricia Herring, pastor of St. John AME Church, and Reverend Dr. William D. Rosser, pastor of Pleasant Grove Baptist Church, for generously opening their doors every second and fourth Saturday and Sunday. Last but not least, thank you to everyone who donated and contributed something to make this yearly event happen, whether it be money, time, or encouragement. As I take my seat and put a closing stamp on my 7th year as a past PYD and a current Junior Frontier member attending the Martin Luther King Junior Breakfast, I want you, if you take anything away from the presentations today, when you walk out of those doors, remember that it takes individuals to rise up and be the change that you seek. So I ask you, will you be the next generation of leaders, accepting responsibility and loving the challenge? Thank you.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. And now I want to present to you the person who has been the point guard of our youth programs, and that is Brother Derek Stapleton. And Derek is over there somewhere. Oh, okay, I see you, Derek. All right. Derek's been the teacher of these young men for a long, long time. We're going to get next year for you how many people have graduated from the program, and we'll do that. We'll do that at a later point. But right now, please welcome a musical selection by none other than Derek Stapleton.
If I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with a word or song, if I can show somebody his traveling wrong, then my living shall not be in vain. If I can do my duty as a Christian art, if I can bring back beauty to a world abroad, if I can spread love's message that the Master taught, then my living shall not be in vain. Oh, my living shall not be in vain. Oh, my living shall not be in vain. If I can help somebody as I pass along, then my living shall not, oh, my living shall not, yes, my living shall not be in vain.
Derek Stapleton. Derek Stapleton. One more hand for Derek. Derek. I call him Derek the Professor. All right. It's time for our speaker. And to bring our speaker up, one of our great yoke fellows, yoke fellow Alan Woodson, who was one of the very first elected people to the city council when the council first started years ago. Also, he's a great frontier. He sat with me all night last night to put together the timetable and a lot of other things on the agenda. He's always there to help, and here he is today, our great yoke fellow, Mr. Alan Woodson, to introduce our speaker.
As you can tell, I'm not Dr. Alan Woodson. However, I do have two things that I want to share. If the Green family management will come at this time, please do so for your presentation. Also, as they're coming, on the tables, real quick, there are envelopes on the tables for Frontiers International Springfield Club. For those that want to contribute, you can do so with the envelopes on the table, and the yoke fellows at the door will collect the envelopes upon your exit. Again, on the tables, there are envelopes for any contributions that you would like to make also. Thank you all at this time.
We're back. As we briefly stated earlier, it is really, as we have said for many years, we are all in this together. And we want to do what we continue to do to make this community a better place. The Frontiers is an organization that has for decades tried to make a difference. And on behalf of the Green Family Stores, our 17 franchises in multiple locations, we want to take this opportunity to present to President Randolph and the entire Frontiers and organization a check today for $3,000 for your constant commitment and your continuous improvement into the lives of the youth of Springfield, Illinois. God is always good. Always good. Let me, in behalf of the Junior Frontiers and Frontiers International, I want to take this opportunity to thank the Green family for their warm and generous contribution to help us with those young men that we have back there in the back of the room. Thank you. Thank you. Now we will have Dr. Woodson present our wonderful, lovely speaker.
Good morning. I am deeply honored, I want to say that again, deeply honored to have the privilege of introducing our speaker. She comes from good stock. And I'm qualified to make that statement because I knew her grandparents and I know her parents. And she's a good person, and you're going to find that out in just a moment. As is our custom here at the Frontiers, we are once again proud to commemorate the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Each year, for the past 43 years, our organization has invited individuals to deliver the keynote address at this gathering. All of these notable invitees, from their own unique perspectives, have tied together the principles upon which Dr. King stood to various contemporary issues facing our nation, some of which Senator Durbin addressed this morning. This morning, that rich tradition continues as we welcome home attorney Tracy Mears. Professor Mears, a working mother of 3 children, and the daughter of Carolyn and Bobby Blackwell, is a distinguished scholar, having been the valedictorian of her 1984 graduating class at Springfield High School, followed by earning a degree in general engineering at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, followed by graduating cum laude with a Juris Doctorate from the University of Chicago Law School. Prior to her current responsibility as Yale University's Walton Hale Hamilton Professor of Law, she was one of the founding directors of the Justice Collaboratory at the Yale Law School. Before joining the Yale University faculty, Ms. Mears was a professor at the University of Chicago Law School and director of the Center for Studies in Criminal Justice. Notably, she was the first African-American woman, let me say that again, the first African-American woman to be granted tenure at both of these esteemed academic institutions. That is simply an outstanding feat. She has not, though, spent all of her time in academia, having clerked a year for local federal appeals court judge Harlington Wood Jr., followed by working as a trial attorney for the Antitrust Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. Her obvious talents did not go unnoticed, given that President Barack Obama named her as one of the 11 members of his task force on 21st century policing, and Attorney General Eric Holder appointed her to serve on the Office of Justice Programs Science Advisory Board. Her obvious talents were seen by many, and after 20 years of legal scholarship and social science research, Professor Mears is acknowledged as a nationally recognized expert on policing in urban communities, with her work focusing on the interrelationship of the public with police officers, prosecutors, and the judiciary. Please join the Frontiers now in welcoming back home Professor Tracy Mears.
Thank you. Wow. That was incredible. Thank you, Dr. Woodson. One hopes one could live up to all those words. I was really incredibly honored to be asked to speak to you today at the Springfield Frontiers International annual breakfast and honoring Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. When one looks back at the list of 44 prior speakers over the years, it's in your booklet, it's worth taking a look at. It's quite clear I have big shoes to fill, and it's more than a little daunting. But I try never to say no when I'm given an opportunity to come back home to visit my parents and family who are sitting right here, Robert and Carolyn Blackwell, my sister Deanna, my brother-in-law Nana, and my cousin Ken Page over there. My greatest sadness today is that my grandparents, Velma and Celie Carey, are not able to be with us. Grandma and Grandpa, this is for you. Some of you may have read a piece published in the local paper, the State Journal-Register, summarizing an interview I did with reporter David Blanchett. He called me in advance of this lecture about a week ago to ask me what I planned to speak about. And I told him that I wanted to discuss the idea of a third Reconstruction as it relates to Dr. King's legacy. The Reconstruction narrative is a powerful one right now. It's invoked by noted civil rights leaders such as Reverend William Barber of North Carolina. He has a book, actually, named Third Reconstruction: How a Moral Movement is Overcoming the Politics of Division and Fear. I recommend it to you. Reverend Barber has a Moral Mondays movement he's been involved in that's turned into a powerful force in North Carolina and beyond. And in fact, he was recently recognized by the MacArthur Foundation with one of its Genius Awards. When I use the term, however, I mean to invoke a slightly different but related idea, one that connects the work of activists involved in the movement for Black lives to the work left undone, maybe a better word is unfulfilled, by the civil rights movement in this country.
In 2015, before Reverend Barber's book was published, the notion of the third Reconstruction was invoked in the context of the work of these activists around police excess in the wake of the killings of Ferguson teenager Michael Brown and New York City resident Eric Garner at the hands of police officers. The work of these activists, predominantly students and young people of color, echoed the work of their parents and grandparents who worked with Dr. King and his colleagues in an earlier era. In the 1960s and today, both groups challenged this country to make good on the promissory note that Dr. King referenced in his iconic 1963 speech. Their question was driven by very prominent incidents of mistreatment and differential treatment of people by the police, both in the 1960s and today. Now, as I think about and write about how people understand their relationship to legal authorities, such as police, especially how they understand whether these relationships are fair in their eyes, I thought I might have something to say when I was asked to speak in honor of the most well-known civil rights activist in this country's history, even though I'm not really a scholar of what people commonly think about when they talk about civil rights or the civil rights movement. So here we go. I'm going to begin in a place that I usually end in my scholarly lectures, and that is with the following statement. Police officers are a particular kind of legal authority. They play a unique role in conveying important information to members of the public about their role and status as citizens. The relationship that members of the public have with legal authorities is foundational to their understanding of themselves as citizens. So I begin here because Dr. King and his colleagues and those who are active in the movement for Black Lives have made police and the treatment of people by police central for a reason. If police tell people who they are as citizens, the question is how exactly do they do that? And Jeremiah, this is for you. They do that through social psychology. So I'm going to do a little professor thing for a minute and then get back to the talk. Social psychologists tell us that how police treat people is very important in conveying information about how people understand themselves as citizens. My research and the research of others shows that people care a lot more about how they're treated by the state as opposed to the ends that those authorities are pursuing. So the idea that people will support whatever efforts police make to reduce crime, no matter how they are treated, is simply refuted by research. So what is it that people do care about? First, they care about participation and voice. They report higher levels of satisfaction in encounters with authorities when they have an opportunity to explain their perspective on the situation or their participation in it. Second, people care a lot about the fairness of decision-making by authorities. And by that, I mean they're looking for decision-maker neutrality, lack of bias, objectivity, factuality. In other words, people don't like it when, this is true of your children, I'm sure, when you say, do it because I said so, they want a reason, right? Third, people care a lot about how they're treated. People want to be treated with dignity, respect, and concern for their rights. People want people to treat them politely. This is the point in my talk where I say, yes, everything you learned in kindergarten still applies. And fourth, in their interactions with authorities, people want to believe that authorities are acting out of a sense of benevolence toward them. That is, people attempt to discern why authorities are acting the way they do by assessing how they are acting. They want to trust that motivations are sincere and well-intentioned. Basically, when it comes to police, people want to believe that in their interactions with police, and it's actually not just police, this is prosecutors, judges, even public school teachers, actually, people want to believe that the authority they're dealing with believes that they count. I'll say it again because this is basic. People need to believe that the authority that they're dealing with believes that they count, and they make this assessment by looking at how they're treated because, as best I can tell, science suggests that we can't read minds. Okay, now why is it that people do this? Well, they're always looking for information about their status in society, individually and with respect to group membership. So treatment by very prominent faces of the state, such as police, give people lots of information. Black people in Ferguson, Missouri, received constant messages of inferiority and lack of worth when they were the only group to be peppered with charges about how high their grass was and subsequently subject to outstanding warrants and piles of fees and fines for failing to appear in court for these picayune offenses. The people of Baltimore were very much aware that they were treated differently by police if they lived in West Baltimore as contrasted if they lived in the Inner Harbor. In Chicago, similarly, the police treated residents of Chicago's South and West Sides very differently from residents of the North Side, and that is a historical problem. It comes as no surprise, then, that the people who receive bad treatment distrust the police and have been active in movements for reform. Okay, that's the social science. I'd like to talk about how these movements have been characterized and their relevance to the idea of Reconstruction. Specifically, I would like to reference the increasingly prominent idea of police abolition. Abolition of police has become a prominent argument in what I call the reform space, although it's probably better described as the transform space. I wrote an essay for a journal called the Boston Review. It's available online about a year ago. That police, as we know it, it's very important, listen to what I'm saying here, police as we know it must be abolished before it can be transformed. Now in the essay, I argue that critics of police abolition caricature the abolitionist view when they assume that police abolition means simply no police. That's why I said police as we know it. That attack is unsurprising, given that it comes from those who are often committed to a notion that crime reduction by police is self-justifying. And by that I mean police can do whatever they can or want to do in order to achieve crime reduction without thinking about the ways in which people might feel about that or how they treat people in the process, or without respect to constitutional rights. This argument is a straw man. Obviously, cities such as Chicago or Baltimore or Milwaukee are struggling with unacceptably high levels of violence and care deeply about having less of it. So when they are arguing for changing police, they are not simply saying we don't care about being victimized by crime. So in Chicago, for example, protests against police violence shut down Lakeshore Drive, as some of you might be familiar with, after the police killing of Laquan McDonald became public. And similarly, protests against the failure of that city's government to address the high level of violence in some neighborhoods also shut down the Dan Ryan. This is the part where I usually explain what the Dan Ryan is, but you guys know what that is. In my Boston Review essay, again, did I say it's available online? Check it out. I quote Mariama Kaba, who has argued, and I'm quoting her now, "For me, abolition is about two things. It is the complete and utter dismantling of prison and policing and surveillance as they currently exist in our culture, and it's also the building up of new ways of intersecting and new ways of relating to each other," end quote. Of course, residents of the cities I just named, and many more, care about being safe from each other and from police excess. I do want to point out what I hope those in the abolition/transform space will consider to be an amendment to their work. And the issue can easily be seen by going back to Kaba. She makes 2 points, one about dismantling and one about building up. Much of the energy fueling the abolition, as some people call it, movement in criminal justice is understandably focused on dismantling the excesses of criminal justice that have built up over time, whether we focus on the millions of people who have been incarcerated, as Senator Durbin just mentioned, or otherwise processed by criminal justice corrections, or whether we are focused on my subject of interest, policing. With respect to policing, excess is a watchword. There's too much stopping, too much frisking, too much engagement of police with civilians with respect to low-level ordinances that have little connection to the real problems people face. There's also too much police violence. While we do not, shockingly, have good and accurate counts of the number of individuals killed by police every year, in the last few years in the United States, our best estimate of that count has not dipped below 1,000 individuals killed by police per year. 1,000. The number in European countries doesn't even add up to the fingers on my hand. It is also the case that violence in some neighborhoods remains a problem for too many residents of primarily urban spaces. Violence remains a problem despite the critical benefit of the decline in homicide over the last 3 decades. Now, to give you a sense of the magnitude of that decline, I refer you to sociologist Pat Sharkey's stunning statistical observation. And he makes the analogy this way. The decline in homicide over the last 30 years is so great that the resulting increase in the life expectancy of black men that we now see is equivalent to what you would see if obesity were completely eradicated from that group. It's a stunning, stunning achievement. Now, given that violence remains a problem for so many people, we should be concerned, right, that a focus on dismantling our apparatus of criminal justice without a theory of the goal of building up puts us at risk of just reduction of the bad of police excess. This is notable, but it's inadequate. Reduction of the bad is certainly more humane, but it's not a citizenship project. So what do I mean by building up? I think the place to begin is to have a very serious conversation about the provision of public goods. And by public goods, I mean state provision of a good that we can all enjoy equally without exclusion, even if we can't afford the pay. Now, these goods are classically national security, but also sewers and public roads, public schools, and yes, police. The problem that the folks in the movement for Black Lives and others, including my colleagues on President Obama's task force on 21st century policing, have noted is that when the public at large experiences the good of policing only by concentrating the costs of producing that good on a small group, such as black people, and particularly Yep, I'll wait. Okay. So, I'm going to back up because I'm about to say something really important here. Okay, so the problem that folks in the movement for Black Lives and others, including my colleagues on President Obama's task force on 21st century policing, has noted, is when the public at large experiences the good of policing only by concentrating the costs of this good on a very small group, such as black people, and black men in particular, it's really hard to say that the good is good or even truly public. We need to create the kind of policing that we all can enjoy. So police transformation requires deep thinking about what it means to say that public good is both public and good. And when one considers the racialized origins of policing in America, from its roots in 19th century slave patrols to its buildup during the early 20th century as an immigrant control brigade, it's clear that a necessary first step to redeeming this public good is to find a new symbolic language for thinking about its role in society. This is where the idea of abolition, I think, comes in when one thinks very seriously about the history of abolition and that term. Because, of course, what you should be thinking about when I say the term abolition is abolition of the status of enslaved people in this country. And the passage of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States did not magically create a world in which formerly enslaved African Americans suddenly enjoyed the benefits of citizenship that were denied them for over 150 years. That was the work that was left for Reconstruction following the Civil War. The tragically short 12-year Reconstruction period following the passage of the 13th Amendment was designed to do some of that work. And for decades after the turn of the century I'm talking, the 19th century, not the 20th, Reconstruction was actually often considered a failure, now due to the basically discredited Dunning, and by Dunning I'm talking about Columbian historian Dunning, Dunning's School History of Reconstruction. So if you don't know who Dunning is, basically if you have seen Birth of a Nation, and the picture of Reconstruction that Birth of a Nation propounds, that was the view, that people thought that Reconstruction was horrible, that carpetbaggers from the North ruined the South, and that black people who were suddenly enabled to provide for their government didn't know what they were doing and created a mess in the South. People don't believe this for the most part anymore, if you know anything about it, thanks to many people, including Eric Foner. But what's really interesting is that there were attempts to discuss the successes of Reconstruction shortly after the turn of the century. And there were some successes of Reconstruction, documented most notably by W.E.B. Du Bois in his magisterial 1935 book on Reconstruction, where he showed how at least 4 million formerly enslaved people tried to create space for themselves as citizens in the new social order by reestablishing their families, creating schools, churches, purchasing property, defending newfound legal rights in court, and electing hundreds of magistrates, county commissioners, sheriffs, legislators, and congressmen. The key to Du Bois's scholarship was that eradication of the legal category of enslavement did not automatically create citizens. The state needed to do more to ensure that rights were protected and that citizenship values were fulfilled. As most of you, I hope all of you know, in this room, Reconstruction was brought to an end by paramilitary violence. Violence that the state perpetuated through state-enforced segregation and disenfranchisement through law that was often enforced by the local police. One need only recall the infamous incidents at the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, for a visual to support my point here. But that incident is especially public. There were countless smaller, more private, if you will, incidents against black people simply trying to assert their rights as citizens. These incidents included lynching, brutality, destruction of property, sometimes actively facilitated by the police, and all too often not responded to by the police or any other apparatus of criminal justice. Isabel Wilkerson, the author of The Warmth of Other Suns, has documented that during the Jim Crow South, a black person was lynched on average every 4 days. This was the stage onto which Martin Luther King and his colleagues, so many women and men and young people who sought to fulfill the promise of the first Reconstruction by ensuring that formerly enslaved people and their descendants could vote, enjoy public accommodations, go to public school without being marked as an inferior or undesirable other, walked on. And because of their work and its successes, some refer to the civil rights movement as the second Reconstruction. And let me be clear, as we celebrate the man whose work is often reduced to 1 or 2 sentences about colorblindness, that King was fundamentally in favor of economic justice. The constitutional rights that he sought to have black people be able to exercise in the South were in support of the full panoply of what it means to be a functioning and effective citizen in one's community. And when he died, Martin Luther King was not well liked. Again, Senator Durbin just mentioned, the vast majority of the people in this country did not like him. They hated him, they called him a communist and a traitor. Let's talk about poll data. Over 60% of Americans had a negative view of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King when he died because of the ideas he stood for. And those ideas were fundamentally about economic justice and in part about the right of all people to have access to the public goods that I was just referring to. So I think it's fair to say for many people that the United States still has not made good on the promissory note that he referred to in 1963 so eloquently. And in the wake of the deaths of Michael Brown, Eric Garner, Philando Castile, Walter Scott, and others, activists have questioned once again whether another Reconstruction is necessary. Their exemplar has been the relationship that so many people of color, and actually people in the general matter, have with the police, and the fatal consequences of too many encounters. Eric Garner lost his life for selling loose cigarettes on a corner. When activists who argue that the lives of people who have died in these encounters matter and argue that policing must be abolished, they mean that policing as we know it must end. Just as during the historical period of chattel slavery, people would have thought it was absurd to say, we will just change the law so that people who are enslaved will no longer be enslaved, but basically everything will remain the same. Different laws for black and white people, differential access to schools, accommodations, different salaries depending on your race. That convict leasing, totally okay for police to brutalize this formerly enslaved group. It is equally absurd to say that police abolition means just no police as we currently understand that role and job and everything else remains the same. That's absurd, okay? Obviously, the abolitionist argument and the narrative that they are trying to propound historically and today implies building up, reconstruction. The state must have a different orientation in education and health spaces. We must do a better job with housing. Support services for families are also important. The state must do a better job of providing for safety and welfare of its citizens because, in fact, That is the essence of police power. And by police power, I'm referring to the way police power is described and defined in the Constitution. In the United States constitutional law, police power is the capacity of the states to regulate behavior and enforce order within their territory for the betterment of the health, safety, morals, and general welfare of its inhabitants. There are lots of ways to do this. It doesn't have to be done punitively. It doesn't have to be done brutally. It doesn't have to be done differentially. And it doesn't have to be done simply by one agency that carries guns. The police power refers to the power of the local government to govern. Mayor? We must build up a conception of policing as a public good in order to fulfill the promise of Reconstruction. In this way, we will not simply imagine policing as a construct that occupies the same footprint as it does now. Reconstructing the relationship that people of color have, especially people that we might consider race class subjugated, have to criminal justice systems in this country is necessary not only to ensure that they are treated as citizens, but so that we can all be collectively citizens on equal footing in this country in the same way. And that, my friends, was Dr. Martin Luther King's dream. Thank you.
Thank you. A wonderful speech. And we thank you so much. Homegirl, thank you so much. We do want to thank you, though, before that, for all that you do for all of the frontiers and the young people that we work with. It's been a wonderful breakfast. We thank you, and we'll see you next year. Derek, let's get the song underway.
Amen. We shall overcome.
Stand up and join hands.
We shall
overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.
The Lord will see us through. The Lord will see us through. The Lord will see us through. The Lord will see us through someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.
Remain standing, Pastor.
Let us pray. Father God, we thank you for the songs, the exhortations, and the message we have heard. Father, help and inspire all of us present, community leaders, clergy, the men and women from all walks of life, to join together with our resources of time, talent, and treasure to embrace and promote Martin Luther King's dream of equality for all. For we can do all things through Christ, which gives us the strength. All these blessings and favors we ask in the mighty and matchless name of Jesus Christ, our Savior. Amen.